Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, December 11th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Peach Bowl against Georgia is in 20 days, the game against Michigan in 349 days. Tony Gerdeman was back this week with one of my favorite features at Buckeye Huddle, his columns, What I Know, What I Think, What I Wonder. It's on our Huddle board there and includes some really interesting thoughts on a bunch of different topics. We're going to discuss just 3 of them here. You should go to the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com to read the rest of them. But, Tony, I wanted to start with Jaxon Smith-Njigba because you've had hot takes flying all over the place and people speaking in very definitive terms about, this is absolutely this way, this is absolutely that way. And it feels like it's not quite as black and white as people are maybe presenting it. And you did a really good job of kind of just sort of laying out some of the conflicting information that was coming out of all sorts of different areas on that over the last week or so. Can you just walk people through that?
Yeah, I think it kind of started with Todd McShay of ESPN coming out and saying that NFL scouts and NFL people are telling him that they're saying that Jaxon Smith-Njigba is healthy and is just choosing not to play in the bowl game in the playoffs. And so then all heck broke loose, and you had the family of Jaxon speaking out saying no, he is not healthy. And then what was it, a day or two later that Ohio State came out and said that he wouldn't be playing in the game. It all happened about the same time, but basically NFL people are saying he's healthy. The family saying he's not. And one of the things I wrote in there is that when you talk to NFL scouts, one of the things you have to remember is they are the most negative people on the planet. They are cynical. They're always looking at the worst of things and always thinking the worst of people and players and prospects. And yet, Todd McShay got buried for just sending out what people were telling him. But I also think that, when you don't present the other side of this is kind of how NFL scouts can be. You're kind of bearing a little bit of the story, but I also think with I definitely think there's concern about being re-injured, and I think if there is that concern, that means you're not quite healthy, because you're not going to play with a concern about being injured or re-injured if you're healthy. You're not thinking about that. When you are thinking about that is when you're not quite there, and even if he were to get there in 2 weeks, it's not going to be any use to Ohio State at that point.
Yeah, and you had something in there also about a quote from Ryan Day that really jumped out to me when I heard it as well, where Ryan Day was asked, this is before the decision was made, and Ryan Day was asked, is this a matter of health or, whether he's willing to play? And it was kind of, Ryan Day's answer was not extremely one way or the other, which then kind of makes you think, okay, maybe there is a little bit to the other side of the story there.
Yeah, he said both. That was his answer. It was just quote both in terms of which it was, and he answered it pretty quickly. And so there's still obviously, I think, am I healthy enough to play? And then if you're healthy enough to play, are you going to play? And they get to the point where they don't believe they are healthy enough to play. And I always say that the longer you're away from something, the easier it is to stay away. And so when with Jaxon Smith-Njigba being away from the team and surrounded by people who are concerned about his future, and some people maybe, agents or what have you, who are more concerned about his future than his present, and trying to protect his present by not having him injured again before the combine, it was going to be very difficult, I think, to convince a non-100% Jaxon Smith-Njigba to play. And I don't think he is. I don't know that he is 100% because, like I said, if you've got that fear of re-injury, then that tells me you're not right.
So that is official. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is not playing in the Peach Bowl or the national championship game if Ohio State does get there. Something that is not official yet, but which seems pretty darn likely, is that Keenan Bailey is likely to get promoted. He is someone who, anytime you talk to anyone around the Ohio State program, you hear great stuff about him, and that includes recruits, and he can't go out on the road and recruit, and he still seemed to be an active part of the recruiting process when guys are on campus and just building relationships and that kind of stuff under, the things that he could do at this point, to the point that you heard his name from recruits maybe more than you heard some of the other guys among the 10 countable staff who can go on the road and recruit. So, what kind of impact do you think he might have, if and when he does become one of the 10 kind of main assistant coaches.
Well, I think you're exactly right about the recruiting, because we've even seen some of, I believe, the 2023 receiver class tweeting out and telling people it's not just Brian Hartline who is building this stuff. It's also Keenan Bailey, and giving credit to him as well. And he's always been a guy that the players have liked. He's been at Ohio State since, I believe, 2016 is when he came over from the recruiting department at Notre Dame, and has climbed the ranks and has been given different promotions under assistant coach, because you can't, like you said, there's only so many assistant coaches. But it has been such that it's clear that they wanted to keep him, and it's clear that he could have gone elsewhere and been a position coach, but they've had this progression for him, and they've seems like they've just been waiting for something to open up to give that spot to him. And with Kevin Wilson and the tight ends coach position leaving, perhaps that will be a spot for him. But and if that is, if you look at what the tight end recruiting has been at Ohio State, when right now your top 3 tight ends are a former linebacker, a former walk-on running back, and a former wide receiver, you do need help in recruiting that area. And they have 3 true tight ends that they've recruited who have really yet to do anything on the field. And so I think Keenan Bailey, wherever he is, he's going to help Ohio State recruit, and getting him out on the road recruiting, especially whatever area he has or whatever position group or wherever, I think he's going to help Ohio State in that regard.
Yeah, there have definitely been some decisions made on the tight end recruiting that, it's always that is, as you wrote, it is a developmental position anyway. That is not typically a place where you necessarily see guys come on the field and just immediately start day one. But, the development for those guys, and some of it's injuries and some of it just haven't gotten high enough on the depth chart to make an impact one way or the other. It hasn't really been there the last few years. And, Kevin Wilson is someone who you did not necessarily hear a ton about on the recruiting trail. So, he will obviously have a big impact potentially in terms of play calling and overall offensive scheme. But on the recruiting trail, that may end up being a net plus for Ohio State, going from Kevin Wilson to Keenan Bailey. So that's something to keep an eye on. Something else to keep an eye on, the Peach Bowl game, and there are a million different angles to this, but you had 3 things, and your column again is called I Know, I Think, I Wonder. And so it's just sort of, here's something that I'm certain of, here's something that's probably true, and here's something that's like, that's interesting. So let's just go through these 3 things. You got an I know, I think, and an I wonder about the Georgia-Ohio State matchup. Your I know is, I know that Ohio State has the passing game to beat Georgia. It does feel like that's probably, of the 4, Ohio State passing, Ohio State rushing, Georgia passing. Of the 4, that does feel like the one that Ohio State is probably feeling the best about going into this game.
Yeah, especially with the pass protection that Ohio State has been able to produce and have out there. And, we've seen a couple of these Georgia games now, and you see some of the ways that their secondary has been attacked, and there is some vulnerability there. And we, keep hearing more and more about Keely Ringo, one of their corners, has been picked on the later on in the season you go. And with the weapons that Ohio State has, and the quarterback and the accuracy that he throws with, and of course Marvin Harrison, let's just mention him by name while we're at it. When you have those things and you have time to throw the ball, Georgia averaging, I believe, 2 sacks a game, so it's not like they're just dominating offensive lines in that regard. So I think, no, Tom. I know that Ohio State can throw the ball enough to win, Tom.
There's the certainty we're looking for there, Skip. Good job. All right, now let's devolve off of Skip. Well, not devolve. I don't think you can possibly devolve from Skip, but let's ratchet things down a notch here to I think. And your I think there on the other side of the ball, I think Ohio State has the front 7 to beat Georgia. If they have the front 7 to beat Georgia, that goes a pretty long way. If they can throw the ball against Georgia and they have the front 7 to potentially beat Georgia, we'll get to I wonder, and the I wonder is not quite as positive, but that feels like if they do have the front 7 to beat Georgia, that would be a pretty encouraging thing for Ohio State fans, because that probably keeps the score down to a certain degree and makes it an even more winnable game for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I like the Ohio State defensive line. I know this is a very good Georgia offensive line, but you get a healthier Mike Hall. I think that will help a great deal as he gets 4 weeks off to finally, maybe if he can be totally fully healthy, that would be great for Ohio State. We've seen his snap count drop since over the second half of the year, but getting him back full strength would be great. Defensive ends are playing well right now, so you're going to be able to pressure, I think, a little bit of Stetson Bennett, but can you contain him? And as I was reading that, Tom, we were just talking about this, the front seven, maybe it should be front six.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that might be the more accurate thing, because you're still going to have to play a nickel against Georgia's 12 personnel. And that's where you get some difficulty, where they can have some numbers and create some extra gaps, and you're having to fill those gaps with safeties. But I do think front 6.5, front 7, is it, how much does Cody Simon play? How much does Palaie Naote play as a third linebacker? How much do they have Josh Proctor or Sonny Styles in there as a third linebacker to help defend? I just think defensive line and having Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, I think those guys are good enough to get a win.
I think when you said front 6.5, that might be what it really ends up being, because it does feel like, just matchup-wise, you'd rather see Sonny Styles in space trying to cover Bowers or Washington rather than Palaie Naote or maybe even Cody Simon. Those seem like potentially problematic matchups for Ohio State, where Josh Proctor for sure, and Sonny Styles is kind of the great Jim Knowles called him a secret weapon earlier in the year, and our buddy Ty Shoemaker talked about him, brought him up as, maybe he's the guy who you throw in there and just say, well, freakish athlete, go do freakish athlete things against their freakish athletes. Because I wonder if Ohio State has the secondary to beat Georgia. And I think with the lineup they've been running out there, I think that's a fair thing to wonder. And I think that the fact that that's the concern, and that's sort of the one that ends with a question mark, that is where I think if I'm Ohio State, I think I'm really exploring what else can you do? Can you throw a Sonny Styles at the problem? Can you throw a Josh Proctor problem? Because Georgia's wideouts and tight ends are better than Michigan's, and we saw what Michigan did.
Well, and the ability to run tempo and keep Ohio State's defense on the field. So if you have a Sonny Styles or Josh Proctor or both out there, who knows what they're actually going to look like out there. But then they run tempo and they basically just use Darnell Washington as a third tackle. Now they're like much bigger than you running the ball. And so you've got to fill those voids with safeties instead of linebackers, and then they can just do whatever they want from either spot. That's why Ohio State likes the 12 personnel as well. It's like why a lot of programs like it, because you can do everything out of it and keep whatever defense you want on the field and take advantage of it. And so, with Ladd McConkey, their number one receiver, they'll throw to the ball to the backs, they'll throw to the tight ends. There's just a lot of moving parts for a secondary that has struggled against, I don't want to say stationary parts, but straightforward parts where they'll just be looking into the backfield too often and they'll get run by. And so if there's many different things to keep an eye on, are they losing sight of what they should actually be focused on? And so I think I don't know how that can't be a concern for people based on what we've seen this season and especially in their last game.
Yeah, no question. There are questions. I think there are some certainties with the Ohio State team. There are some probables with the Ohio State team, and there are some questions with the Ohio State team. That makes the I think I wonder format work pretty darn well. So if you would like to read the rest of it, we're only talking about a small percentage of the stuff that Tony wrote in that. It is always one of our most popular features. So you can find that on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Now I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You have to be a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com to do that. So this would be a great time to sign up to become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony's column is just one of our fantastic recurring columns and features from our staff that are only available to our members. Mark Gevler does his Skull Session recruiting column. Alex Gleitman does his ADAC recruiting column. Ross Fulton and Justin Whitlatch and Devin Radcliffe. I mean, those guys are all killing it on the X's and O's beat. A lot of that stuff is exclusive to our members as well. So if you enjoy our shows, and if you're still listening, I would assume that means that you do, then you would probably enjoy being a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com as well, and talking to us there and getting insight and analysis from our fantastic team of insiders. So consider signing up today. It is $12.99 a month. It's less than 50 cents a day. go ahead and sign up. It will get you through. If Ohio State makes a national championship game, that $12.99 will get you through the national championship game. So just to, skip the coffee drive-through this morning and treat yourself to a month of Buckeye Huddle instead. And again, if you aren't sure if someone's asking you, what do you want me to get? You're hard to shop for. What do you want me to get you for Christmas? Have them get you an annual membership to BuckeyeHuddle.com instead, and enjoy 12 months of fantastic insight and analysis from a great team of insiders, and pretty fun, active community there as well. So that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.